Ibrahim Traoré stood alone in the dimly lit presidential office of Ouagadougou, his eyes locked on the dossier spread across his oak desk. The rain outside lashed against the window, drumming like distant gunfire. In his hand, a coded message from an insider deep within Tel Aviv's corridors of power. Proof that Benjamin Netanyahu's administration had been quietly funding covert operations in West Africa, aiming to destabilize regional alliances that had so far resisted foreign influence. Traoré clenched his jaw. His presidency had already survived 2 assassination attempts and endless foreign interference, but this betrayal sliced deeper than any bullet. For months, whispers of Israeli operatives working through local militias had reached his intelligence officers. Now the final piece lay before him. Names, bank transactions, signed directives. It wasn't just an insult to Burkina Faso. It was an open declaration that Africa's independence was still for sale to the highest bidder. Traoré knew Netanyahu wouldn't expect an African leader to retaliate directly. That arrogance was exactly what he planned to crush tonight. Outside his office, Colonel Sanogo, his most trusted commander, waited silently. When Traoré emerged, his face was carved from stone. Mobilize the inner circle. Tonight we send a message to Netanyahu so clear, Tel Aviv will feel it by sunrise. Sanogo nodded without a word and vanished into the storm, radioing coded orders to loyalists scattered across the capital. As thunder cracked overhead, Traoré's motorcade slipped into the wet darkness, heading toward a secure facility where his most loyal advisors were gathering. He knew that confronting Israel would draw fire from every direction. Europe, America, even some neighbors would brand him reckless. But Traoré didn't care for labels anymore. The time for subtlety had ended. Inside the armored vehicle, Traoré replayed in his mind the betrayal that had pushed him to this edge. He thought of the farmers who had lost their land to foreign corporations, the young soldiers ambushed by mercenaries armed with foreign weapons, all funded by powers who smiled in daylight and stabbed in the dark. Tonight, Netanyahu would understand. Africa has its lions too, and they don't roar until they strike. As his convoy weaved through rain-slick streets, an encrypted call from Tel Aviv buzzed on his satellite phone. It was a high-level Israeli envoy, desperate to negotiate. Traoré let it ring. Tonight, there would be no negotiations, only his final warning. Deep beneath Ouagadougou, in a secure military bunker carved into the granite bedrock, Traoré's inner circle assembled. 20 trusted officers, intelligence chiefs, and regional governors formed a tight semicircle around a holographic map of the Sahel region. Their faces flickered in the blue glow, hard, disciplined, loyal to Traoré alone. He stood before them, the dossier on Netanyahu's covert operations projected behind him like a digital indictment. There was no room for doubt. Bank trails led back to Israeli shell companies, mercenary contracts matched footprints found in border skirmishes, and intercepted communications named high-ranking Mossad handlers. The web was vast, carefully hidden until now. Traoré's voice cut through the silence. Our people are not pawns for foreign chess games. Tonight, Israel learns that Africa's sovereignty is not for sale, not for bargaining, not for intimidation. Netanyahu has pushed too far. We push back, decisively. A murmur of approval spread through the bunker. Colonel Sanogo stepped forward, outlining the plan. Targeted raids on militia camps funded through Israeli proxies, immediate arrests of double agents within Burkina Faso's own security ranks, and a broadcast to expose the entire network to the African Union and the world. It was bold, some would say reckless, but the element of surprise was their shield. One young intelligence officer, Adama Coulibaly, hesitated. Mr. President, retaliation on this scale risks dragging us into a broader conflict. Israel has allies who won't sit idle. Traoré's eyes, usually warm and unhurried, were cold iron tonight. If they wish to test Africa's resolve, let them come. We have no illusions about the cost, but we will not kneel. The room stiffened with a sudden unity. Generals checked weapons. Communications teams double-checked encrypted frequencies. Traoré knew this was more than a counterstrike. It was a statement for every African nation still shackled by hidden foreign hands. He raised a clenched fist. By dawn, Netanyahu will understand that Burkina Faso is not alone. Our brothers in Mali, Guinea, Niger, they watch us now. If we stand, they stand. As the plan unfolded, couriers and encrypted messages shot out across West Africa. Trusted allies were alerted. Foreign journalists quietly tipped off. Within hours, Israel's covert reach in the Sahel would be on every headline, and if Netanyahu dared to deny it, Traoré had one final card, a direct message, pre-recorded in perfect Hebrew, addressed personally to Netanyahu himself. When the final words echoed in the bunker, everyone knew. This was more than a warning. It was Traoré's line in the sand. The storm outside roared louder as the bunker doors swung open, letting in a rush of cold air and the sound of distant helicopters powering up. Traoré stepped aside from the holographic map, motioning for Sanogo to stay close. Tonight's operation demanded unwavering precision. One leak, one hesitating officer, and Israel's network would scatter like rats in the dark. Meanwhile, in Tel Aviv, Netanyahu's war room buzzed with encrypted alerts. His national security advisor, pale and sweating, read aloud the intercepted chatter. Burkina Faso's forces were on the move, militias were fleeing their camps, and black market arms stockpiles were being seized by loyalist commandos. It was a counterintelligence nightmare unfolding in real time. Netanyahu slammed a fist on the polished mahogany table. Who leaked this? I want names now. But even as his team scrambled, he knew the truth. They had underestimated Traoré. They'd seen him as another regional strongman, easy to buy off or topple. They hadn't realized this young captain, once dismissed by Paris and Washington, had built an intelligence apparatus sharper than any Western analyst imagined. Back in Ouagadougou, Traoré's motorcade raced toward the National Broadcast Center, a building fortified since the last coup attempt. He needed to speak to his people before Israel's allies could spin the story into chaos. Inside the armored SUV, Traoré held a tablet replaying his pre-recorded message for Netanyahu one last time. In it, his voice was calm, but carved from unyielding stone. Prime Minister Netanyahu, I know your hands fund chaos in my homeland. I know you see Africa as a chessboard for your ambitions. Tonight, I take that board away. I give you one chance. Withdraw your agents, cease your covert manipulations, and respect our sovereignty. Fail to heed this warning, and next time I will not merely expose you, I will make your secrets your downfall. He paused the playback, staring at his own resolute eyes on the screen. There was no turning back now. Traoré had risked everything: political survival, fragile alliances, even his life. But the betrayal demanded a line no leader with a spine could ignore. As they approached the broadcast center, soldiers cleared the road. Journalists, local and foreign, were already assembling under the cover of the storm, lured by rumors that the president would address not just Burkina Faso, but the entire African continent and Israel in a single speech. Sanogo leaned in, his voice low. Mr. President, once you do this, there is no more hiding, no more compromise. Traoré placed a hand on his loyal commander's shoulder. That is exactly the point, Colonel. Let Netanyahu hide in shadows. I lead in daylight. He stepped out into the downpour, raindrops soaking his military uniform, each step carrying the weight of a continent's defiance. Tonight, the world would hear his last warning. Under the floodlights of the National Broadcast Center, the scene was electric. Rain hammered the courtyard, but it didn't drown out the growing murmur of journalists, soldiers, and staff. Camera crews scrambled to cover their equipment with plastic sheeting while network engineers rushed to patch a direct feed to the African Union's satellite network. Tonight, Traoré wouldn't just speak to Burkina Faso, His warning would echo through every capital from Abuja to Addis Ababa and reach every intelligence desk in Tel Aviv, Washington, London, and Paris. Inside the main studio, Traoré sat alone before the flag of Burkina Faso and a simple wooden podium. His uniform, soaked from the storm, clung to his broad shoulders. There was no teleprompter, just handwritten notes and the raw resolve burning in his chest. An old technician, trembling but proud, counted him down. 3, 2, 1. The red light blinked on. Traoré began, his voice steady but edged with iron. To my people of Burkina Faso, to our brothers and sisters across Africa, and to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, this message is your final warning. He laid out the truth in plain words. No diplomatic varnish, foreign money funding chaos, mercenaries trained in desert camps, local leaders bribed to betray their own. He named names, quoted bank accounts, and showed intercepted orders. The evidence poured onto screens across the continent like wildfire, blowing apart decades of whispered suspicions. In Tel Aviv, Netanyahu's Security Council watched in stunned disbelief as their covert network unraveled in public view. Diplomats scrambled to prepare statements, but Traoré was already 2 steps ahead. If you, Mr. Netanyahu, believe Africa will forever bend its knee to your ambitions, you have gravely miscalculated. We do not fear your threats, your mercenaries, or your shadow deals. Tonight we cut your strings from our land. From this moment on, every African leader knows we stand as guardians of our own destiny, and to my people, fear nothing. We are not alone. We never were. A roar erupted outside the studio. Soldiers and civilians gathered under the storm, cheering his words. In markets and villages across Burkina Faso, old radios crackled to life, families huddling together to hear their president declare freedom from invisible chains. Traoré ended with words he knew Netanyahu would understand better than any threat. He spoke them not in French, nor in Mossi, but in perfect Hebrew. This is your last warning. Respect us or be forced to. He stood, saluted the flag behind him, and walked out into the storm. No spin doctor, no PR team, just the raw, dangerous truth echoing in every embassy on Earth. Behind him, the broadcast replayed on loop, unstoppable, as the world braced for Netanyahu's response. The moment Traoré stepped out of the studio, the capital was alive. Crowds flooded the streets despite the rain, waving flags and chanting his name. In hidden corners, foreign agents who'd once operated freely now scrambled to erase evidence and flee. Colonel Sanogo handed Traoré a secure tablet. Live feeds from the raids flickered on screen. Militia camps burning, weapons caches seized, and captured operatives kneeling in mud under guard. Years of covert sabotage dismantled in a single night. In Tel Aviv, Netanyahu faced a crisis he hadn't planned for. His closest advisors urged him to deny everything, but the evidence was too damning. Worse, African leaders, emboldened by Traoré's stand, were calling emergency meetings. Israel's quiet influence in the Sahel was collapsing like a house of cards. Back in Ouagadougou, Traoré met with his inner circle. They will respond. Propaganda, economic threats, maybe worse, Sanogo warned. Traoré nodded. Let them. Tonight we proved something bigger. Africa will never be anyone's secret battlefield again. He turned to Adama Coulibaly, the young officer who once doubted him. Prepare our next steps. This fight isn't over, but tonight, we showed Netanyahu exactly who he underestimated. Outside, the storm finally began to ease, but for Traoré and his people, the real storm was just beginning. As dawn broke over Ouagadougou, the city was restless but alive with a new sense of defiance. Local radio replayed Traoré's speech on a loop, and social media buzzed with clips of captured mercenaries and burning militia camps. Farmers, students, and soldiers alike knew. Last night changed everything. In Tel Aviv, Netanyahu gathered trusted advisors behind closed doors. His eyes were bloodshot from a night without sleep. "Contain this," he ordered. But containment was impossible now. African leaders were already demanding answers, and European diplomats wanted explanations too. Meanwhile, Traoré met key regional allies in a hidden conference room near the presidential palace. Envoys from Mali, Guinea, and Niger sat across from him. All had watched his warning live. Some feared Israel's retaliation, others smelled opportunity. Netanyahu will try to twist this, Mali's envoy said. He'll claim it's propaganda. Traoré's stare silenced the room. Then we stay ahead. We share everything, documents, footage, testimony. No more secrets. He ordered immediate declassification of all proof Israel's operatives had left behind. Even skeptical foreign journalists would have nowhere to hide. Truth was now Traoré's strongest weapon. Outside, Colonel Sanogo coordinated the final raids. Hidden arms caches were seized. Paid traders were dragged from safe houses. Small crowds cheered each convoy returning with evidence and prisoners. Back in the palace, Traoré recorded a short, sharp message for international media. Africa is awake. We choose our future, not Tel Aviv, not Washington. This is the beginning. His warning had become a promise. By midday, the world's news cycle was hijacked by one name, Ibrahim Traoré. Major networks dissected his broadcast, while analysts argued whether Burkina Faso could survive the storm it had unleashed. Some called him reckless. Others called him Africa's new lion. In Tel Aviv, Netanyahu's inner circle debated next moves. Some pressed for covert retaliation, cyber attacks, bribery of rival officers, perhaps even assassination. But Netanyahu knew Traoré had become more than a local problem. Any strike now would backfire under the global spotlight Traoré had created. Meanwhile, in Ouagadougou, the streets pulsed with an energy Traoré had never felt before. Old rival tribes marched side by side, waving national flags. In village squares, people shared rumors that other African leaders might soon expose hidden foreign ties in their own lands. Inside the presidential palace, Colonel Sanogo reported the final numbers. Dozens of foreign mercenaries captured, hundreds of weapons seized, and local collaborators confessing on camera. Netanyahu won't forgive this, Sanogo warned quietly. Traoré stood by the window, looking at his people gathered in the square below. I don't want his forgiveness. I want our children to know we didn't bow. He turned to Adama Coulibaly, who now led the intelligence cleanup. Spread the evidence across all trusted media. If Netanyahu dares deny it, the world will laugh at him. For the first time in years, Traoré allowed himself a rare smile. This wasn't just about Israel anymore. This was about proving Africa could no longer be treated as someone else's secret battlefield. As drums and chants echoed from the streets, Traoré knew one truth. A warning once given must be enforced. By nightfall, Ouagadougou felt like a capital reborn. Bonfires lit neighborhood squares, where villagers debated what would come next. Young people painted slogans on walls. Africa is not for sale, and Traoré's warning is Africa's warning. Inside the palace war room, Traoré and Sanogo reviewed fresh intel. Satellite images confirmed Israeli-linked operatives fleeing into neighboring borders. Traoré ordered patrols doubled at every crossing, no escape without a trail. Meanwhile, Netanyahu's cabinet fought over damage control. Some urged backdoor talks with France or the U.S. to pressure Traoré into silence. Others proposed economic punishment, freeze aid, lobby the IMF to squeeze Burkina Faso's fragile economy. Netanyahu stayed quiet, weighing how much force he could risk without triggering a wave of African unity that might cost Israel far more than a few Sahel operations. Back in Burkina Faso, Traoré met with students, farmers, and union leaders. He wanted them to hear the truth directly from him, not foreign channels twisting his motives. I didn't pick this fight, he told a crowd of young farmers under a giant baobab tree. But when they bring the fight to us, we finish it our way, with truth, with courage, with unity. The crowd erupted. Word spread fast. Traoré was not hiding behind soldiers. He was walking village to face with the people who had the most to lose if this turned into a full-blown crisis. In the background, Sanogo coordinated quiet talks with sympathetic neighbors. Mali, Guinea, and parts of Niger signaled they would stand by Traoré publicly if Netanyahu pushed further. One line was clear now for both leaders. Traoré had made his last warning. Netanyahu had only two choices left: pull back or risk making a martyr whose defiance could ignite the entire continent. As the days passed, Traoré's message spread beyond Africa's borders. In Europe, activists quoted his speech in protests against foreign meddling. In newsrooms from London to New York, journalists debated whether he was a hero, a nationalist threat, or both. In Tel Aviv, Netanyahu faced pressure like never before. Secret talks with American and European envoys revealed the same truth. If he escalated, he risked turning Traoré into an African icon for generations. Quietly, Israeli diplomats began sending feelers to West African leaders, trying to calm the storm without admitting defeat. Meanwhile, in Burkina Faso, Traoré doubled down on unity. He ordered the release of evidence archives to trusted international reporters, ensuring no spin could bury the truth. He met with religious leaders, students, and opposition figures, urging them to stand together despite political differences. At night, he spoke with Sanogo on the palace balcony overlooking a city finally at peace. "Did we win, Colonel?" Sanogo asked. Traoré watched the flickering streetlights and the distant sound of drums. "We won a battle, but we warned the world we will never bow again. Now we must keep that promise." He knew Netanyahu wouldn't forget this humiliation. Hidden plots might still come. But Traoré also knew something else. Once a people taste true defiance, they never forget how it feels. In Tel Aviv, Netanyahu's final order was simple: pull back the remaining operatives quietly and deny everything publicly. But behind closed doors, he vowed to reclaim what he'd lost, one way or another. Back home, Traoré prepared his nation for the long game ahead. His warning had worked. Now he had to make it last. Weeks passed, and the ripples of Traoré's warning reshaped alliances across Africa. In regional summits, leaders who once whispered in foreign embassies now spoke openly of building stronger local security networks, independent from old power brokers. The African Union quietly sent envoys to Ouagadougou, seeking Traoré's advice on pushing back against covert meddling continent-wide. In Burkina Faso, life slowly settled. Farmers returned to their fields without fear of raids by foreign-funded militias. Young officers trained with renewed pride, knowing their loyalty was to their people alone. Murals of Traoré's speech appeared on city walls, painted by youth who now saw him not just as a president, but as a symbol that Africa's voice could roar louder than any hidden hand. Inside his office, Traoré sat with Sanogo and Adama Coulibaly. They drafted long-term plans, strengthening borders, modernizing intelligence, and investing in rural communities so no bribe could ever again buy betrayal. One evening, as dusk painted the sky red, an encrypted message arrived from Tel Aviv. It was Netanyahu's final move, a carefully worded statement denying all involvement, calling for renewed dialogue and offering discreet aid packages. Traoré read it once, then calmly deleted it. He turned to Sanogo with a quiet smile. "He heard our warning. That's enough for now." Burkina Faso's capital glowed with lanterns and distant drums. For the first time in years, Traoré let himself breathe without watching the shadows too closely. He knew new threats would come, different names, same old greed, but he also knew Africa had tasted its power. His last warning to Netanyahu had done more than expose secrets. It had reminded a continent that true freedom doesn't beg, doesn't bargain. It warns once, then stands unshaken. Outside his window, children's laughter drifted up with the night breeze. Traoré closed his eyes and whispered to himself, "Let them come. Africa is ready." In a world where power often hides behind secret deals and foreign hands pull unseen strings, one leader's defiance reminded a continent of its own strength. Ibrahim Traoré's last warning was never just for Netanyahu, it was a message to every force that seeks to divide, exploit, or silence Africa's voice. This story stands as a symbol that true sovereignty is not given, it is defended, sometimes alone, sometimes against giants, but always with courage. Burkina Faso may be small on the world map, but its roar now echoes far beyond its borders. As the dust settles and the hidden networks retreat back into the shadows, the people stand taller, prouder, and ready to guard what is theirs. For in the end, freedom is not a gift. It is a promise kept by those brave enough to warn once and stand unshaken forever. Thank you for following this tale of courage, betrayal, and unbreakable resolve. Stay vigilant. Sometimes the smallest nations teach the loudest lessons.